Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Very glad to have on with us today Arnie Rothschild, the campaign spokesman for Republican Assemblyman Joe Arrigo. Last week we had on Marjorie Burns, who's Arrigo's opponent, and it's very close to the primary, so we want to have all the primary candidates on that we can. Arnie Rothschild, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, you've worked on a lot of campaigns, you're a long-time political consultant, election consultant. You also have a radio background, and you're working now for the Joe Arrigo campaign. Now, Joe Arrigo comes to the Assembly with previous Assembly and a lot of other government experience. Can you tell us about that?
Well, Joe has been in the Assembly a total of 6 different terms. He also was a commissioner of the Transit Authority, the Rochester Greater Regional Transit Authority. And so, he's got a lot of government experience. He's got a lot of committee experience in legislative bodies, and he does a great job in the 133rd Assembly District. The other thing to point out is that Joe Arrigo has the highest conservative rating in New York State. There's 213 legislators in Albany between the Senate and the Assembly, and Joe Arrigo has the highest conservative voting record.
Joe, it's no secret, is very opposed to Common Core and the SAFE Act. Now, he was not around when either of those things went through. I'm sure he would have voiced his objections if he had been there. Joe Arrigo, I'm just looking at his bio. He's got a very interesting bio going back to the 1990s with some appointments from former Governor George Pataki. If you could speak on Common Core and the SAFE Act there for Assemblyman Arrigo.
Well, and there's another, by the way, and that I want to introduce you.
Sure thing.
Recently the governor announced that he was restoring, if you will, voting rights to 35,000 convicted felons. Many of them committed felonies against children, and Joe is really dramatically opposed to that kind of treatment as well. Common Core, I think, this kind of goes hand in hand with not only our responsibility to educate our children appropriately, but also one of the things that he pushes back on a lot is that there is the most significant political contributor in New York State right now is an organization called NYSUT, the New York State United Teachers. And so in this entire question of education, Joe is on the forefront of pushing back against both not only the concepts of Common Core, but also NYSUT. And then a lot of his committee positions, especially the one on aging, become important for people of the district. Joe, the district, the 133rd Assembly District, there's a lot of seniors that really do need New York State to do a better job looking out for them. And so Joe's on the forefront of that in his committee work. And then when we get to the issue of the SAFE Act, which without question, Joe violently, if you will, opposes, as by the way, as does everyone in our part of the state. I mean, this is a New York State legislation at its absolute worst. And I want to tell you a story about what I've been told happened in that legislation. So a bunch of liberal/socialist legislators sit in a room, and they start talking about what they want to do with the governor in terms of taking away people's ability to have access to ammunition and guns. And someone said in the room, well, how many rounds does a magazine typically hold? And they said, well, about 14. And then they said, well, we can't say 0, so why don't we meet it in the middle and just say 7? Well, a lot of liberal New York City kind of politicians really view life that way. They don't understand what it's like living in our part of the state. They certainly don't understand Monroe and Livingston and Steuben counties, and they don't understand that people hunt and that this is part of our heritage. And so it's an assault on the Second Amendment, and it is meaningless legislation because it accomplishes virtually nothing. So Assemblyman Arrigo has been very vocal about that. Now, there's an interesting problem that I want to share with you, and it deals with there are 150 New York State Assembly seats, 150, but 91 of those seats are east of the Tappan Zee Bridge.
It's funny you should bring that up. State Senator George Witter, I interviewed him, probably 10 years ago, and he told me exactly what you're saying right now, talking about the way it was redistricted a long time ago in order to favor the downstate Democrats.
Mm-hmm. So here's and this is one of the great advantages of Joe Arrigo. So let me tell you what that is. So there are two ways that you deal to try to pass legislation favorable to your district. You can either stand up in the assembly and grandstand and make speeches that accomplish nothing because you're in the minority, or what you can do is you can voice your opposition, but then meet with Democrat legislators as well and try to make a compelling case to change the nature of legislation. And Assemblyman Arrigo, because of his vast experience and great relationships that he's had for many years, is able to accomplish that. And so, he's one of those guys who say, speak softly and carry a big stick. He's a Republican that has great credibility on both sides of the aisle. And as a result of that, he does a really great job in constituent service, does a really great job in terms of representing the interests of the 133rd, and he is a very able and accomplished legislator.
Talking with Assemblyman Joe Arrigo, spokesman Arnie Rothschild. Arnie Rothschild, if we could get back to the 25,000 pardons that you mentioned earlier in the interview. Some conservatives maintain that this is a way of Governor Andrew Cuomo to get 25,000 future votes come November. Do you think Joe Arrigo would agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And actually, Brian, fortunately, it's 35,000. So basically, you've got 35,000 convicted felons. 35,000. Now, let's talk about motivation from the governor's point of view. So the governor is involved in a statewide election, and he moves farther left and farther left every time that Cynthia Nixon says something. But this is beyond the pale. Can you imagine giving those voting rights back to 35,000 convicted felons solely so you can be reelected governor? And what that does to both our political process, but also the message it delivers. That message is, it's bad enough that we talk about sanctuary cities, but giving convicted felons voting rights again, it's beyond the pale. And Assemblyman Arrigo, made those kinds of statements, and in fact, in some of his campaign messaging, it's been out there as well. So, he's fighting every day for the people in his district, and he does that both in reaching across the aisle to try to work through some things with legislators that may have a better understanding of life in the 133rd Assembly District, and he's been very effective, and as a result of that, he's very well respected. One of the things, by the way, that I want to, there's been kind of a whisper campaign that's gone on in this race about his health.
That was my next question, Arnie Rothschild. Arrigo has a radio commercial out saying he's in great health and has a 100% attendance record.
And that's true. It was 2018. Now think about this a second, okay? So there's a whisper campaign going on, unfairly, talking about his health, and yet 100% conservative voting record. There are 92% conservative voting records and 100% attendance. So, if there's something wrong with it, you don't show up for work every day. You don't make that commute every week. But this man does, and he's representing the interests of the district and also and especially seniors. And so the nature of that whisper campaign should be offensive to any senior voter, because look, I'm getting older, and it offends me when someone says, well, you forgot my name. Well, yeah, I forget names on occasion. But the thing is that truth of the matter is this man shows up for work every day. And that commute is a very taxing commute. And I guarantee you that if you were to check the attendance records of a lot of much younger members of the assembly, you'd find they're not there. I know of 2 assemblymen that were at no more than 2 sessions in the entire year.
That is pretty bad, and it sounds like it's a pretty impressive attendance record for Assemblyman Joe Arrigo. We're talking with Assemblyman Arrigo's campaign spokesman, Arnie Rothschild. Arnie, the Buffalo Billion. Now, this is something that Assemblyman Arrigo has sent out a lot of press statements on, the Buffalo Billion scandals.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what does the Assemblyman say to you about the Buffalo Billion?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the unfortunate situation with the way that this is pay for play at its very worst in New York State. There's been some convictions already. There was holding out, by the way, in different parts of the state that there was going to be a lot of photonics jobs that never existed. But basically, during the years, the latter years, especially of the Cuomo administration, there's been an attitude that anything goes to buy votes. So now he won Erie County last time. I recently looked at polling, and the governor was only at about 48% approval, I believe, in Erie County. And the solution, and that's after he threw $500 million at the area. So, this, and yet, let's take a look at how much money has gone to Monroe, Livingston, or Steuben. And the answer is pitifully little. The whole process is tainted, and Assemblyman Arrigo has been, vocal in his opposition to it.
Yes, on the issue of bringing back funds and grants to the district, give us his feelings. I can surmise what they are from what you just said, but a little bit, if you could expand on that, Arnie Rothschild.
Sure. Let's talk about how the game is played down there. So, if you're in the majority, you're getting really significant amount of money, and the majority controls the chairmanship of committees. And they're given a significant amount of money in what used to be called member items or asks that you can make for your district. If you are in the majority, the speaker will drive key projects and drive money into districts where they think a representative may have some political problems. That's been the play that you see in Erie County somewhat. So Joe has to continually try to attach things and get money moving in right directions and try to work through the turmoil of what that Albany machine looks like. And as I mentioned to you, currently there's 107 Democrats in the Assembly and 43 Republicans. So as you can imagine, the Speaker is not going to be doing anything really to help unless there's votes attached or they can leverage voting during the gubernatorial election. Now, the process is wrong. I mean, the process is wrong. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that Assemblyman Arrigo has been able to work very collaboratively with Republicans in the state Senate because the Senate is still a majority Republican body. So that's one of the ways that he's able to exert some leverage on behalf of the people of his district. But I got to tell you, it's a tough world down there, and it is not a place to be absent having a lot of experience dealing both across the aisle with the protocols of Albany and having notoriety and longevity. So, our interests are all well served because he's there.
Going to take a quick break, then we'll check the forecast, then we'll be back here on this Monday morning with Assemblyman Joe Arrigo campaign spokesman Arnie Rothschild. Stay with us.
Save up to 50% off at local businesses in our certificate sales. Still going on. Go to our website, fun921.com, for all the details. pay with a credit card, or choose to pay cash in person. Then come up to our station to pick up your certificates. Don't have a computer? Visit us here at the station on Ashbrough Hill Road, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Now, here are some of the sponsors we have certificates for. Annie's Restaurant, BK's Boutique and Florist, The Country Kitchen, Jody's Hair Design, Kimberly Glover, Milliner's Southern Smoke, Soho Clothing Exchange, and Yarn Over. And be sure and check back often because we're always adding new certificates. Thanks for saving money with us here at AM 1480 WLEA and Fun 92.1.
Meteorologist Rob Carolyn, and we're reporting in the news this morning that the Dansville Festival of Balloons got off to a late start because of the extreme heat there on Friday. What's this week looking like, Rob?
It's looking like the warm weather continues, Brian. We've got another Bermuda high that's taking control of the weather and what's helping to prevent cool air coming down from Canada, which we'll get into the Dakotas from heading our way as the tropics are starting to get a little active. We've got a depression this morning heading towards the Florida Keys that in the next 24 hours is likely to become a tropical storm. Got another tropical storm way out in the eastern Atlantic. So when you start to see the tropics heat up, they start more or less moving warmth northward. That's their job. And what they're going to do is help the Bermuda high keep our temperatures above normal for a good part of this week. Brian, for today, we're going to enjoy partly to mostly sunny conditions. May see a shower or thunderstorm this afternoon. So anybody who's going to be outside later today, just kind of keep an eye to the sky. It's 85 to 90. Tonight, there may be a brief shower or thunderstorm. We turn partly cloudy overnight. Lows will fall back to about 65 to 70. Tomorrow, lots of sunshine. It's going to remain warm and humid again. Temperatures tomorrow up to 85 to 90 with the risk of a shower or thunderstorm. Clear to partly cloudy tomorrow night, 65 to 70, and then sunny and hot for Wednesday, 85 to 90. I finally see the heat breaking by the time we get into Friday. Brian, sunrise this morning, 6:38. It'll set this evening at 7:40. This is one of the last days that the day is going to be longer than 13 hours.
Back on Newsmaker, I'm Brian O'Neill. We're on today with Monroe County political consultant, election consultant, Arnie Rothschild, who's the Arrigo campaign spokesman. The long career and experience of Joe Arrigo seems to bring a lot to the table. You said in segment one that one of the reasons you feel that Arrigo is a great guy to have in the assembly these days is his longevity and his many connections in the state assembly. And this is, if you could expand on that, how he gets things done in Albany.
Well, one of the things that when you're watching television or you're reading the newspaper that you don't see, people pay a lot of attention to what goes on the floor. And the floor of the assembly or the floor of the Senate is theater or the House of Representatives. And earlier, by the way, Brian, you referred to me as Monroe County Republican consultant, but I also I did Judge Cohen's work in Livingston. I did Tom Reed's first three congressional races. So I've worked for a long time in the Southern Tier and in Steuben as well. And so and what you see on television is not what really happens. Basically, there's horse trading, if you will, where the speaker, who is kind of the imperial presence in the assembly, doesn't necessarily talk to everyone. He only talks to those people that have credibility with him. And I can tell you that from my time watching what goes on the floor, when Joe walks across the floor to go talk to a member of the other party, they are very receptive and they listen to him, and he can have all kinds of input. So it's important. The thing is that the truth of the matter is liberal New York City, bordering on actually the socialist New York City, runs roughshod over the rest of the state. So what we have to do is we need experienced legislators who really know how to fight and claw and scramble to get things done. And he certainly knows how to do that. And as a result, he's very well respected. It would be very hard to consider replacing someone with that kind of longevity, credibility, ability, and entree.
Assemblyman Joe Arrigo issued an interesting statement back in late May. It said, new AG must be free from Cuomo influence. Now, the Republican Attorney General candidate is a guy named Keith Walford. Correct me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly there, Arnie Rothschild. But Arrigo made an interesting statement about that. He said, we've taken the appropriate steps to replace State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. We can only hope that Underwood will free herself from the grip of Governor Cuomo's influence and be an independent, nonpartisan attorney general. For years, we've seen Cuomo manipulate everyone from politicians to donors, and his web of criminal activity has only continued to grow. This is the part of it. This next part caught my attention. We need an attorney general who's focused on the law and not making headlines, covering for Cuomo and bickering with Trump. A lot of conservatives feel that either the governor wants to run for president someday, or he's running against Trump maybe because of his campaign against Cynthia Nixon, and so in campaigning against Nixon, Cuomo mentions Trump a lot. Your thoughts? Did Assemblyman Arrigo or you have any thoughts on the Keith Walford campaign for, if I'm saying it correctly, for State Attorney General?
Well, first of all, let me kind of expand on what it was the Assemblyman was talking about. You know, we had commissions, the Moreland Commission, that was studying activity and the political pay-for-play, and then the governor pulled the plug on it. And without question, the of Attorney General Schneiderman, who was also using the office to showcase himself in the hopes that he was going to run for governor, there was significant abuse. And that significant abuse, it took all kinds of different forms. Perp walking people. There was a case in Monroe County where there were going to be some people accused of wrongdoing, and they asked to come in and just voluntarily surrender for their court appearance. He said, "Okay, meet us in the building across the street at 10 o'clock," and then there were camera crews there. And so they handcuffed these people, and they walked them across in front of the television cameras solely after they had agreed to voluntarily show up, solely so that the Attorney General could talk about his tough prosecutorial stance. Well, this is abuse. You're dealing with people's lives and their families, and by the way, most of those people were exonerated. But that's been a style that's permeated through the Attorney General's office, and fortunately, we have a different Attorney General, and you hope that Attorney General doesn't talk to the governor, because we've got some high-profile trials going on, and so you've got when you have people that have been convicted, like a man very close to the governor, Joe Prococo, and the state is negotiating during plea bargain stages. There can be conversations about whether or not there's information that they can get about other people that were involved in the same conspiracy. So the last thing you need is the governor's office picking up the phone and saying to the AG, "Hey, I got a little concern about this. Sit on that." That just can't happen. But it has happened. So we need a less politically driven Attorney General. Joe wants the law enforced fairly, equitably, and in balance. And that's why he's supporting. We need more statewide Republican elected officials, without question, because we're moving towards sanctuary cities. We're moving towards paying for health care for illegal immigrants. Some of the policies that are being floated. There even was an assembly bill, by the way, to ban the removal of cat claws. We have a ridiculous political system in the assembly right now.
There's a lot of nonsense in there, Arnie.
Yep. And what we need to do is we need to focus on some real issues, not the least of which is, our budget in New York State is out of control. And Joe is one of those guys who continually has voted against every tax increase, budget increase, because he's a fiscal conservative, and he has to swim in a tank full of liberal socialists, bigger fish, because they're from New York City. But he does it effectively.
Assemblyman Joe Arrigo, campaign spokesman Arnie Rothschild, down to the last minute or two. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, this is, this has been a very difficult political period of time, nationally and especially in New York State. We need good, solid, conservative, experienced elected officials, and I'm proud of Joe because he meets all of those descriptions. He's done a great job as a legislator, looking out for the people 133rd, and deserves to be there.
Arnie Rothschild, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's my honor, and the polls open at noon on the 13th. It's important that people vote, and so turnout is going to be important. And I hope that all the people that have known Joe for a lot of years show up on the 13th and say, you know what, you've done a good job.
Arnie Rothschild, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.